Hey guys, this is Dagon123, and welcome to
Tenchicast!
Hello everyone, and welcome to the next exciting episode of Tenchicast, presented by Tenchiforum.com. The Tenchi fandom has been in a whirlwind as of late because of two doujins that came out recently at Comic-Con 85 in the winter, and they have some very exciting information in them that I'm sure you will all be interested to hear. But first, I'm going to do roll call. Chuck?
Didn't we just do one of these yesterday? Oh well. How's it going, everybody?
Crazed?
Hey there, everybody.
JG?
What's up?
Mittens?
Hey.
Nil?
Oh, this must be where pies go when they die.
And Who?
Woohoo! I'm back.
Unlike Tenchicast in the past, this is going to be much more in the form of general discussion as we explain everything and kind of give our hints and theories and general excitement and hype. But before we do that, we are going to have the two translators who are a part of Tenchiforum's Heaven and Earth translations relay the information, and the person to relay that information will be the main translator on Tenchibon 1312 and Tenchi Muyo If, Crazed.
Yes, two very interesting doujins that came out of this Comic-Con, folks. Tenchi Muyo If deals with Tenchi's two daughters, one that he'll have with Ryoko, one that he'll have with Ayaka, and also Seina's son that he's going to have with Kiriko. There's not a lot of text in the If doujin, so all we have to go off of is the pictures. It shows the children as babies right after they've been born, and it shows age progression all the way up till looks like their high school years. There's no names, nothing like that. The big interesting piece out of If is on the very last page. Ryoko and Ayaka's daughters are going to marry Seina's son. How you may feel about that, I'm not sure. Tenchibon 1312 is a doujin that focuses mainly on Kenshi, and it leads up to right before the first episode of the anime, War on Geminar. Essentially all 1312 has in it is it just talks about Kenshi's training with Ryo-Ohki, and it explains why he has the skill set that he does, how he's so adept at hiding and things of that nature. In the afterword for Tenchibon 1312, Masaki Kajishima has announced very interesting things, and in case you may or may not have seen it already, easiest way I think to do this is I'll just go ahead and read you word for word what we got out of that doujin. It's been hectic this past summer and winter, but I'm finally commencing negotiations on the new anime. I did not explain this portion of the story in the anime because it would be far too long and the feeling of tension would be lost. I wanted to make it easy to come into for those that had no knowledge of Tenchi. I think I will return to War on Geminar and treat it the same as Tenchi. The plan is to continue to add on to War on Geminar's story in a written form. It's fun to draw. So basically that means War on Geminar, at least for the moment, is only going to be getting new content in the form of doujins or novels. Maybe both, one or the other. We don't know as of yet. And in the next part, now then, I'm going to talk about the upcoming projects. Even though this is talking about what is being made, let me share with you in the most unprofessional way a heart-to-heart. At the Winter Comic-Con, Tenchi Muyo If was released. The book was released in the style of a storyboard. However, the explanation for its content was not included. Because the doujin is tied to an anime project, I didn't want to reveal much. The contents of Tenchi Muyo If will be the future installment. When you pitch a new Tenchi project, it's a good idea to try and entice them with pictures. I've been trying to avoid images that would be considered finalized. As was the case with the original, working in collaboration with others can be difficult. I think that in the future it will be to create more finalized images if future books are released in this format. Additionally, the Tenchi Muyo GXP novel is complete. The anime project is still incomplete, but maybe it will be complete by summer. Now, what I got out of that is, he says if is in the form of a storyboard. So as of this point in time, it's fairly safe to say that it looks like what's in if will be in OVA 4 or however he goes about doing it. How much gets changed, edited, that's still up in the air. The only other thing that I can think of is that will be animated is Paradise War. He's been pushing Paradise War, the novels of it, extremely hard, and he's trying to prove himself to get those animated. Other than that, that's really all that we got out of these dojins. So now we're going to see what we all have to say about this information.
We try to do as best we can with the translation. We have had it verified by nearly a half dozen people at this point that, it may not be absolutely perfect depending on your, dialect, I guess, in Japanese, but it's what's there is what's being said. So it's accurate enough for us to, be having a cast on it and put this forward and feel confident in it for everybody out there. So a couple things stand out to me, which again, I kind of am leery of mentioning or bringing them to the forefront because, depending on how they actually are worded, the idea that Tenchi Muyo If is a storyboard, particularly the idea that he said that he avoided images that are finalized, which is, you look at If, and it's very specific information taken at snapshots of the characters' lives, development, whatever you want to call it, over a long period of time. With If, like Craze said, they start out as babies, having just been born, and to some extent directly prior to that, because we see Ryoko and Aika pregnant, up to probably like late 20-ish type years when they get married to Seina's son. So it could be that, it doesn't seem like the characters would be something that you could say are up in the air because they're a continuous theme. Maybe those particular events being shown along the way are still in flux, so they may not happen. So my question would be to throw out there would be, if this is not the finalized material, then what of it is that he's planning around? Hopefully we get more of a science fiction, return to the OVA 1, maybe some 2 type structure to another anime coming out for OVA 4, rather than the political mess that was OVA 3. They just kind of info dumped from all the previous dojins that got a real big knee-jerk reaction from everybody. For those that are more classically minded, Ryo-Ohki is still in the picture. She still exists. There's a bunch of different things out there that we don't know exactly where everything fits in. You do get to see in 1312, as Craze has mentioned, Ryo-Ohki kind of tormenting Kenshi from War on Geminar. It does show you some interesting things in there. Particularly, one is that Ryo-Ohki ages or matures incredibly fast, faster than Kenshi, and goes, skips right through her age forms, straight up to adult, even before Sasami does, but she still has a mentality more so of a child. There's some interesting things in there. Paradise War is an unknown somewhat at this point, but we know that it does have Seina Yamada under a pseudonym, and there are more Ryo-Ohkis introduced, which is also seen in If. I believe they're also seen in 1312 briefly, but there are a lot of things starting to come to a head here, and I imagine a lot of it's going to tie together in OVA 4, which we can look forward to possibly having seen something more than likely more by winter.
I just want to throw in there that one of the things that people, especially if you follow Kajushima's continuity, things are very, very loose. Things change quite often, oftentimes without making any sense and are never corrected. Now, bearing in mind, JG had mentioned there are other dojins out there, but it's interesting that the way that Kajishima is doing Tenchi Muyo If, not only the fact that he's doing another doujin, because this is the first doujin that he's done that is specifically a new doujin, not a continuation of Tenchiban or the Kajishima Onsens or anything like that. This is brand new. His style is different. There are different things in it. One big thing in particular is the fact that Ayeka has a daughter. Many fans for years, even back in 2000, had pictures of Ryoko and her daughter, and that was confirmed to be the first child that Tenchi would have and Ryoko would have, and that the fans have dubbed it Tenko. But there were no other kids until a mysterious, not even colored character that's supposed to be Tenchi's son appears in the 21st Century Doujin. But Ayeka at no point was ever referenced to have a child. And I bring that up because all signs of this doujin are pointed to be made politically. And by politically, I mean he's making this doujin because he knows he has to sell it to somebody. He has to sell this to executives at AIC because his last contract with AIC is up. And this is my opinion, but I have a feeling and so far I haven't been proved too wrong. I have a feeling that Kajishima actually had to prove himself because his contract with AIC before started in 2001. He was given full control of the budget. He was given full control of how things would work out. Well, AIC, the animation company, was bought by the slot game, and pachinko machine company Oizumi in 2010, I believe. And so the power structure, I'm sure, of AIC fluctuated big time, and they no longer are honoring his work before. I mean, they're not going to give him anything just because he worked with them before. He has to prove himself. And I think that's why there's such a big shift in Tenchi Muyo If, because if you look at his GXP novel 10, or the artwork for it, it looks like what has been his normal style for the past 7 or 8 years, as opposed to Tenchi Muyo If, which has more rounded, which is more round and more warm, and it's more, dare I say, even slightly classic Tenchi. Like, there's more of a softer feel to it. You can't land planes on Ryoko's ears anymore. It's something that is very, again, this is my personal opinion, I think that Kajishima has to prove that this is worth looking at. It's not something that he can just throw in whatever and say deal with it. This is something that he has to sell to people, and that's why he made If the way it was. Now, JG brought up an interesting point as well, in that, or Crazed and JG, that part of the process, or that Kajishima said he wanted to stray away from images that were finalized. Which is interesting because in If, he refers to it as the story of the future is not yet settled, or this is not necessarily the story of the future. But then in Tenchiban 1312, he goes at lengths to say that yes, this is the future of Tenchi. So it's interesting that he's playing two sides. On the one side, he's playing it very politically smart. On the other one, which is Tenchiban 13, he's coming out straight and saying this is what's going to be the future. And to me, that says that he's not going to have as much power in this new one because he's already had to step away to show people that it's worth making. So I'll let everybody else throw in their opinions as we keep discussing, but it's interesting. It's interesting that this is so different for Kajishima, because it's actually him having to work towards someone else as opposed to someone else working for him.
There's like a content difference as well between some of his previous works. Like in If, we're seeing at the very beginning, we're seeing characters, pregnant and then giving birth and going through these like stages of life that actual human beings would, whereas in OVA 3 a lot of this was kind of hand waved around and things were taken a little bit more with a comedic tone, which OVA itself is, it was a more serious show up until then, and then the style, the attitude towards the subject matter changed rather drastically. And here we're seeing Kajishima tackle the actual effects of Tenchi finally manning up and getting with, Ryoko and Aika, and, them actually going through the biological process of giving birth and having these children. And then we see them go through the stages of actually being the mothers of these children, as they deal with Seina's son becoming involved with them as they're growing up. And we see Ryo-Ohki aging rather rapidly, still maintaining a childlike attitude according to the Tenchiban, but being physically matured much quicker than say Sasami, who also grows up in that time frame. And I don't like it's interesting to see, because this is a huge turn from the way things have been in the most recent OVA, and it could be fun to see in the if the new OVA does truly take this. Like, how far back are we going to start? Are we going to actually see the relationships with Tenchi and Ryoko and Aika develop to the point where they finally all agree that this is the best way to do things? Or are we just going to kind of skip ahead at the first episode, like fast forward it and be like, okay, well, now Ryoko's pregnant because something happened, and you move on from there, and the rest of the OVA be a gap to bridge the series? It'll be interesting to see what route they take, if if as he says, becomes the future.
My reaction to these doujins is a bit bipolar at first. On the one hand, I'm very excited to see Kajishima finally getting back to main cast Tenchi things, and more than just bath sequences and doujins, actual plot and character development. But on the other hand, I think I speak for many in the fan community when I say I'm still not sold on the harem ending, and it's probably never going to sit right with me. And so, while I'm very excited to see this new direction, it's not sitting right with me to see both Aika and Ryoko getting with him. I mean, I honestly, I wouldn't prefer one over the other too much, but I don't like the harem aspect of it, and I think many people agree with me out there. But I'm not going to let that detract from my excitement, because I think behind the scenes wise, this is the best indication in the last 15 years we've had for real forward movement in the Tenchi franchise. And I really think that, especially what Dagon said is true, that Kajishima is finally being brought back into the creative process with the main cast Tenchi, and he's going to have to work with other people again, like he did with OVA 1, and I think it's going to work out pretty well, because the last time he worked in a collaboration with talented people with a more restricted budget and less creative control, we got OVA 1, and it's the best Tenchi's ever been. So I think there's a lot of reason to hope with the information out of these new doujins, but at the same time, it's not perfect, and I really take that his little bit at the end of If about the future is not set. I'm really hoping that is not just smoke being blown around. I hope that there's oversight from a higher level on what he's doing, because I have high hopes for Tenchi, and I would very much dislike it to see it continue along its present path. So I have hope that these doujins will change that.
But I just wanted to jump in here with what Chuck was touching on with people's reactions, I guess. First of all, my personal reaction was just at seeing this finally, and still right now, I'm too overwhelmed with just joy that, one, we're continuing, but two, just that thing that I think all of the fandoms just kind of wanted to see. We're just Tenchi's babies. And I was like, oh, and I was like, finally. And the whole thing, like I said, me personally, I'm thrilled with what I've seen so far, but I do think that what Chuck mentioned and how others feel about, well, one or the other is one thing, but both, and I think that's a perfectly valid view, because a lot of people will jump to, well, it's a harem anime. We'll look at GXP, Insana. Well, it's kind of a funny thing, because look, when Tenchi started out, harem genre wasn't really established at that time so much, and it wasn't so formulaic, where the harem ending, dude gets all of the chicks and gets them all pregnant, and polygamy fest, what have you. So then Tenchi goes unfinished for a long time, and then think of when GXP was made. Harem anime came out between when Tenchi started and when GXP was eventually produced, let alone where we're at now. So I do empathize for people that feel, I don't know if I want Tenchi to go this way, even though it is quote unquote the granddaddy of all harems, because it was so unique and groundbreaking at the time, and then to see it in turn be resumed later down the road and just start going along those tracks. Oh yeah, this is a harem anime. This is how it's going to go. I can definitely see why that would be like, why don't we try something a little more bold? But that's just me.
Also jump in here, that's interesting to note that I picked up on the other day was Crazed, when he was going over translations, Kajishima made the point that he was kind of having, I guess, not necessarily flashbacks, but the process he was working on with the anime that he is working on right now reminded him of problems, as he quoted them, problems he had with people in the past, and that he actually had to work with people and he couldn't just do whatever he wanted. That made me interested in because then the next statement was he referred to Tenchi Muyo If as a storyboard, and he referred to Tenchi Muyo If as if it had not yet been negotiated, because there was a point where he said he was negotiating anime. This strikes me as interested because he first let on 2 years ago, in fact, in 2011, 3 years ago, I guess. Well, technically not 3 years yet, but in 2011, he referenced that he was working on several anime projects. Okay, but Tenchi Muyo If had not even been an idea currently. I mean, I would have liked to have thought that we would have seen something a little bit more from it if he had a concrete idea. In fact, we didn't even see Paradise War until recently. And now there's a good chance that, unlike in our previous cast where we said that, Saint Knight's Tale 2 was, or as I call it, Saint Knight's Tale 2, but War on Geminar 2 was a possibility, now it seems like War on Geminar is only going to be continued in novel form. So, to me, that strikes me interested because we have no idea if the new Tenchi series are going to be OVA at all. They may end up being TV series for budget concerns. But I also think that it's interesting that, and I'll do a little bit of backstory for people here, Kajishima has never, ever promoted anything he didn't put his stamp on. You'll notice that the entire time that Universe, Tokyo, and the 3 movies were proliferating and coming out and being the majority of what people associate with Tenchi, he never did one doujin, he never promoted them, he never said anything about them. The only things he ever promoted and talked about were things that he himself made. So that to me says, well, what if there's another anime project that's been in the works that he's not promoting that is possibly like a Universe or a Tokyo or a movie, but one that's not associated with his works, because he's the type of person to, if it's not 100% his, he will not talk about it. So, in my opinion, I think that there is in fact another mainline spin-off in the works, because if I were AIC, I'd be stupid not to cash in on that, but the signs are kind of pointing to the idea that in order for Kajishima to be able to produce what he wants, he has to let AIC produce what they want to make as well. But another thing to remember there is that Kajishima himself was actually a part of every part of Tenchi. The only parts that he was really a big part of was the OVA, was because the person who actually helped him write his novels was the director for OVA 2 and 3. So, for Universe or Tokyo or the movies, he was like executive animation department or whatever. He wasn't in a huge role, but he was there. The signs are kind of leading that, yes, we will more than likely see Tenchi Muyo If, absolutely. Whether or not it's called OVA 4, whether or not it's an OVA at all, is yet to be seen. But I've got money that if GXP is never going to see an anime again, which is what he's pretty much said before, because of the way that he didn't like how Nabashin directed it. War on Geminar is not getting an anime because it's going on in novel form, and if he would have said something, because he pretty much flat out said that Tenchi Muyo If is in the stages of becoming an anime. It's in the stages to be negotiated. Oh, what are the other anime projects? in my heart, I believe there is going to be another main cast spin-off in the same vein as Universal Tokyo. Whether or not that happens is anybody's guess, but I've my chips are on that card. We'll see if it gets played.
I'll throw in my 2 cents. Basically, my reaction was, wow, Tenchi has kids. And, that flying Ryoku baby was adorable. So it was exciting to see the latest dojins and to think about the future of Tenchi Muyo. Also, as a Mihoshi fan, I'm curious to see if, she has a kid with Tenchi someday or maybe some of the other girls too. And like others have said, I don't know, I'm not really into harems, but I'm understanding and here's to the future, I guess. Hopefully good things to come.
But I think there is another explanation too for why these other animes, being plural, may not be mentioned. I mean, it's hopeful to think that there may be something else that he's not telling us about here, which is easily his prerogative to do so and would not be out of character for him to be holding other cards till some other time. I think that it's a good possibility too that, as we saw with Geminar, from what I understand, sold fairly well, both in the States and a little bit less so in Japan. GXP was pretty much a flop. OVA 3 pretty well, to a large extent, flopped. I think there's a good chance there that Kajishima may have gone back to AIC, which has been mentioned, came under new ownership, and he wasn't given so much rope, so to speak, to hang himself with. So it could have been more so that he had in mind, or he had old contracts or other things that gave him entitlement to getting X amount of projects that he wanted to do. But when he went and talked to essentially the new overlords at AIC that held the purse strings, they said, no, back the truck up here. We're going to need, something else to show us that you can still be relevant. So it could be more that he just does not have the leeway that he had originally. And harem anime, as it were, doesn't have nearly the audience that it did back in the 90s, and it was much more tame back then anyway. So, you can also use, other examples like Love Hina or Ayori Aoshi or any number of other ones that were more classically themed back around that same time frame compared to the stuff nowadays, which is almost, you could almost say it's in a parallel dimension or an alternate dimension. It's so different. So, yeah, I think it's more likely that maybe he just doesn't have the control that he once did. And yeah, Flying Ryoko baby was pretty cute.
That baby was adorable, and anyone who hasn't seen it yet should totally check it out. We have scans up at tenchiforum.com, free for anyone to look at without joining up. They're for the community. We do everything for you. But yeah, those babies. That's my favorite part of the whole dojin, was those babies.
The big thing, and the big thing that fueled that idea that I had was specifically because Kajishima does not have the control that he did. In fact, I'll reference Crazed, one of our translators at large, when he translated, I think it was 21st Century Crazed, when Kajishima was talking about money.
Yeah, that was in the 21st Century Dojin.
In the 21st Century Dojin, he, for all intents and purposes, he basically came out and said money was misappropriated, and by misappropriated meant he put all of the budget into GXP and War on Geminar. He got 45 to 50 minutes per episode for War on Geminar at 13 episodes, which rounds out to about a 26 episode series. Yet, ironically, Tenchi Muyo OVA 3, or as it was released over here, Tenchi Muyo Ryo-Ohki, only got 6 episodes at a horrendously small budget, and then got also a 7th episode a year later. And so, it's very telling that magically all the money goes to GXP and War on Geminar, the things he wanted to do. But then, the big one that everybody wanted to see, not just over here, in Japan as well, magically doesn't get the budget that it's supposed to. So, I think that Kajishima has lost his power at AIC, and is, again, having to change it around. And if I were AIC, I would want more than just one series of Tenchi, because Tenchi's a moneymaker. That was proven when Funimation changed the name from Isekai no Seikishi Monogatari, which has nothing to do with Tenchi Muyo, and partly why it didn't sell as well in Japan, to Tenchi Muyo War on Geminar, effectively putting War on Geminar's Part 1 when it came out as the highest selling thing they had that quarter. In fact, it was not only the highest selling thing they had in home video release, it was highest viewed thing they had on Hulu at the time when it released. So the name Tenchi Muyo sells any series it's put on. It's like Star Wars. So again, my gut feeling is that there's more than just Tenchi Muyo If as far as Tenchi Muyo is concerned coming down the pipe. I have a feeling Paradise War will be there too, but I just wanted to throw that in there.
On the note of Paradise War, this is probably, strike me down if you will, but I just wanted to go on the record now saying, because it seemed very ambiguous, and yes, it seems leaning towards, at least to me anyway, that Will, or at least Kazushima, would like that also in animated form to some degree, whereas how long the episode's going to be or how many he'll get, I don't know. But doing that, and then there was the whole mystery of, is this Seina? Is this a pseudonym for Seina? And it's like, what's going on here? And then that just popped into my mind with seeing If here with Seina's son there, who's, we don't know what his name is. So what if we got Junior there, and he's trying to do a spin-off series that route? That just kind of popped into my head. But of course there are a lot of obstacles, like has been mentioned here, from the producer standpoint and the people controlling the purse strings, as you said, Dagon and JG, with regards to Geminar and GXP. But that was just a thought that just occurred to me.
I've written about this extensively on the forum, but my hope for the more expanded universe in Tenchi, especially with these two dojins, comes from the children, because as it stands now in the OVA continuity, Tenchi's a god, and nearly all of the people in his house are gods of some sort, and no one can touch them. And it seems like Kajushima's really written himself into a box. So I've talked about this on the forum before, but the fact that he's moving towards the next generation, I think, really signifies the best way to move out of that box he's written himself into. Because the children don't necessarily need to be plagued by the writing problems that the parents are. They don't need to be overpowered. They don't need to be invincible. They can leave the house and go on their own adventures, and we can see actual compelling storyline again in Tenchi. And so, like who was saying, it would make sense that it would be the children who are now being focused on in the spin-off projects. And I really think that's a great idea. Like, props to Kazushima if that's what he's actually thinking, because that is probably the only way to write himself out of the box he's in right now. We know from a previous dojin that one of Tenchi's future sons does in fact run away because he finds the household overbearing and restrictive. And so the prospect of having maybe Ryoko's daughter going off into the universe and becoming a space pirate, that sort of potential really comes through in these dojins, and that's what I'm personally hoping for to see, because without a major retcon, or even a remake for that matter, the main Tenchi storyline is pretty much done. You can't go anywhere further. They're invincible. They're going to rule the universe. But the children, on the other hand, is a different story, and that's where I'm hoping to see the continuation of compelling Tenchi storyline come from.
Well, technically, Chuck, you could write them out of the box, but the people behind the series aren't competent enough to do it.
True enough. I was being generous.
It is a pickle, though, that I will kind of agree with what Chuck originally said there, whether he was being generous or not, that, yeah, I've gone over that so many times before we've gotten to this point with all this, the prospect of new things, and I too like the idea of the clean slate with the kids, new generation, new adventures, getting out of the household, away from mom and dad, but yeah, like I've been thinking that all the time ever since I saw the third OVA. Is like, well, all right, gosh, I sure don't want to be in their shoes to be like, well, now what?
You mean moms and dad?
Are we really going to see anything that different with the kids? I mean, they've got the GXP, or they've got the GP behind them. They've got the three goddesses behind them. They've got Tenchi behind them. I know in our villains cast we came up with really good ideas for people, and some very good ideas actually for villains that could, really do that. But we haven't seen any antagonist or any antagonistic nature or plot or setting happen at all. I mean, granted, it is a very short dojin, but there's slice of life is okay, but Tenchi was born and bred on space fantasy and adventure, and I think there's a bit of a disconnect that the kids have to have from their parents for them to be able to really get away. Like, they would have to run away because they're stuck there. They're at the household. They're an extension of the God mod, and it's more. I think it's more. It's harder than Kajishima thinks it is to simply write a new generation in, because that doesn't fix all of the holes, and the holes are still there. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. At this point in the game, I think Tenchi, AIC, whatever, they need to have a swan song. They need to have a one night stand, if you will, which I know we've talked at lengths about, for Tenchi, for the old fans, for the classic fans. Doesn't have to be OVA continuity, doesn't technically have to be quote unquote canon, but just something that will give people a better note to leave off on, and then they can do whatever they want, or attempt to do whatever they want, because to get them out of that box, to get them out of that hole, it's going to be tough. And it's going to be something that they either A, are going to have to take head on, B, they're going to just roll with and keep rolling that pea down the mountain that it's been rolling down for 10 years, or C, forget that it happened in the first place and change it up. But again, right now, all we're doing is sitting at speculation and being hopeful for the future.
Not to shift it away from the politics of production, a couple of interesting things I see in If as well is, other than the very first page where we've got Flying Ryoko Baby, we don't see any instance of them again exhibiting any abilities. If anything, we actually see them more natural, if you will, being that later on, well, I guess we're going to continue to call her Tenko for the time being, wearing glasses, which you would think wouldn't be necessary, as well as getting injured and some other stuff in there. There's not really any superpowered variations that we can see here of them exhibiting that. No, it doesn't mean it's not possible. Maybe we're just not seeing that side of things. But what are your thoughts about their ability and perhaps the OVA 1 throwback that's in the one page?
My immediate thoughts there, and that's a great point, JG, is I think that might be an inclination, whether or not that's what the an actual anime, if it followed up, would focus solely on. Hopefully it would have more than this, but it could be kind of what Dagon was saying. Well, did kind of paint themselves in a corner here. What do we do from here? Well, one of the options Dagon listed, I believe, is just kind of ignore it, more or less. Just roll with it. Not saying, oh, that stuff never happened, but just ignoring it. And so what do we see here? Well, it's very slice of life oriented. It's saying, oh, look, it's Ayeka's daughter in debate club, and it's Ryoko's daughter being studious and hitting the books there, and they're going to school. And so maybe they might just, all that stuff happened with Tenchi breaking 10 dimensions or whatever, and yeah, he kind of lives with, the beings that created the universe, but we're going to focus on, hey, Tenko, quote unquote, had a really awkward day at school. Oh, let's and go that route. But that's just my thoughts there.
Well, that's one of the things that I'm less excited about potential-wise from this new stuff, because if Kajishima is being 100% honest when he says that Tenchi Muyo If, the doujin, is storyboards for OVA 4, or whatever we're calling it, it pretty much amounts to OVA 4 Tenchi Muyo Daycare Edition, and that would be very disappointing to me, because, as has been said, Tenchi Muyo, it was born as a space opera. It was born as space fantasy and very dreamlike, and just, I mean, I have no problem with the slice of life. OVA 2 was very entertaining and it was very slice of life oriented, but in the end, it got back to the space opera aspect. And to see the entire OVA for what we're calling it now be summed up as slice of life, that would be very disappointing to me, and I think it would be to other people as well. But at the same time, I agree with what Who is saying that they're not focusing on the powers, and I think that that's a good sign because it's a step away from the overpowered household that we've seen, and hopefully maybe this storyboard was only for episode 1 and they'll move more back into traditional Tenchi Muyo flavors later, but I'm leery at this point, and it's hard because I'm also very excited. It's an exciting time to be a Tenchi fan, but it comes with risks as always.
Well, I'll throw more fuel on the fire then. I noticed too that if you consider the page links for storyboards, that's often important, but there's only about 9 pages here of content. So if they were making a 9-episode, let's knock that back up to, let's say, dual length or typical length, it's about 12 to 13. You could take roughly 1 page per episode, which might be slightly disturbing, but also my other thought too is, we talk about him writing himself into a corner. If this is all that he's got, which I would hope not, and it would make very little sense to show your entire hand, it kind of seems like he may have written himself already into a corner, because we already see the end, which is Seina's son getting married to the other two. So that leaves no more room for, well, who they going to pick, what's going to happen, what, blah, 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 blah. Unless we're starting off, like everybody's mentioning, with essentially this being a very quick 2 or 3 episode prologue as a jump to move into, the adventures of Seina's son and blah, 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 blah.
If I were doing this, I would say, just thinking here, writing this out, screenwriter mode here, I would even say, like, a lot of the early moments when they're infants, and even up through, you can see, I can't recall which pages, but you can see there's clearly they're invoking, our collective memories from the past here. With we see Seina's son and Tenchi's daughters waiting out the rain in that what appears to be that exact same shack. I'm sure it's supposed to be, and I could see, even, I mean, you don't even need to do an episode for that, part of an episode for that. Really, just like a montage, really, just to kind of show people them stop along the way to show, oh, look how cute the kids are, but then just kind of probably starting off, if he was actually doing this in anime form, not talking about some other written works or illustrated works, but as an anime form, I could see him just really, we start the ball rolling when they're adolescents. And of course, however, JG brought up a great point. Well, he threw in there, them getting married there, and it's kind of like, well, hopefully he wouldn't have just given away the ending there. And I guess he can always fall back on it, especially at this point. Well, it's called If, people. It's called If, which is a nice out to leave for yourself while still generating hype.
I think Mittens brought up a good point earlier in that at this point we sort of know that Kajishima is going for the harem ending. Tenchi marries all of them, and it would stand to reason then that the rest of the girls, other than Aika and Ryoko, will also have children with Tenchi. And if the If Dojin is just one small slice at the future continuity, perhaps there could be stories involving the other ones that wouldn't necessarily be as overly powered as we're assuming Ryoko and Ayaka's daughters might be. Like, I would personally love to see what a child of Mihoshi would get up to. I mean, I would imagine that's like one exception, I would imagine, to the slice of life rule of mine, and that would actually be pretty entertaining to see that child's growth. And I think we'd all be interested to see a Washu child. That would be very entertaining and very interesting to look at. But I think there's a bit more than what is being shown in this doujin. I think this is just a teaser, and hopefully, this is not all that there is. That the marriage of Seina's son and Ryoko and Ayaka's daughters, that's not it, because that would be very disappointing if that was all of it, if that's all Kajushima's got after almost 10 years of time to work with Tenchi Muyo. So, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of the harem ending, but if it leads to more adventures with the children of the characters, I think I could probably turn a blind eye.
One thing to also keep in mind of, and JG brought this up when he said something about, is this all Kajushima's got? Is he throwing this is his royal flush? But Paradise War is something that he came up with in concept, but he's not actually writing. He is actually, someone else is writing Paradise War for him. So it's interesting to note that maybe Kajushima only is coming up with, what we're seeing as the quote-unquote storyboard are just loose concepts of what could happen, and that writers at AIC or another writer is essentially filling in the blanks or possibly even changing it. Hence why Kajushima himself is referring to it as Tenchi Muyo If. Like, this is my idea, but this might change in the future. Maybe Kajushima's taking a step back, because that would be another interesting thing. If he's not even helming a project, one of his big projects itself, that being Paradise War, maybe he's finally stepped back from writing in general, and he's just kind of letting everybody else kind of run with it.
Another interesting observation is that it ends just like it starts in If.
Indeed, yeah, I did notice that circularity of the Dojin. It's not very original, but I think it worked in this respect.
I'm shocked I didn't notice that. I'm glad you said that, JG. It's like, oh, so it is.
It's a cute bookend, but as Chuck said, it's not an original idea under the sun, and in a way, it kind of disappoints me that is. I mean, as has been said, this is If, so he could just shrug his shoulders and say, "Well, this was just a what if," and brush it off if criticism comes his way. But making it so that everything would be so circular, perfectly bookended, like, oh well, Tenchi ended with 2 wives, as far as this is concerned, 2 children that are getting involved, and now his 2 children are marrying this person, and the cycle continues, and it's just kind of like, it's as Dagan said, is this the best that you've got after the 20 years? Like, really? I'm kind of disappointed if that is truly all there is to the end of it. I would definitely like to see something a little bit better than that.
Like we've said, there's hardly any text with this one here, as opposed to most other works. And I agree with, I hope he didn't give everything away, show his whole hand, so to speak. I doubt he would do that. He has a little more finesse than that, I think, and I honestly think this kind of would tie into what Dagon's been saying about needing to prove himself again, or needing to get more steam behind any future projects. I kind of see this mostly as just something to really get Tenchi fans hyped up about again, and to get people talking about it again, like we are right now. And so for me, I'm with people saying, yes, gosh, I hope this, we haven't seen, this is exactly how it's going to be laid out, but I don't think it is, and I'm not really treating it as such, even though this is straight from Kajushima. I think based on what it's been called and everything else we've brought up, there's plenty more to be excited about and to speculate on further down the pipe.
Yeah, I think as a bookend to my remarks throughout this entire cast, I would like to say, I think we in the larger Tenchi fandom, it's important to approach this new information from a twice burned standpoint, because that's pretty much what we are at this point. We were burned with GXP and we were burned with OVA 3. So, I mean, take it with a grain of salt, but at the same time, look to more recent examples. This is the second year in a row where Kajushima has really come out swinging with Tenchi material, whereas he was pretty much silent for the last 10 years. And then there's War on Geminar, which is proof that he can still be part and write part of a very entertaining and a very exciting story that doesn't involve highly overpowered characters, although we have argued in the past that Kenshi is super overpowered, but I wouldn't say it reaches the level of godhood like Tenchi. So I would say that the pieces are there and the potential is there, more so than it has been in the last 10 years. So, I mean, approach it with trepidation, but there is good reason to hope that this is the start of a exciting new chapter in Tenchi Muyo franchise history.
I want to thank everybody for coming in on a kind of off schedule for us to do a Tenchicast, but it is important because, like Chuck said, it is a very exciting but trepidatious time. It's like being excited to walk through a minefield for Tenchi Muyo fans. But subscribe to us on YouTube if you like what you hear. Come to the forum if you want to be a part of the amazing discussion and the amazing community that is Tenchi Muyo. Follow us on Facebook, Google+, Twitter, every social media outlet that you can think of. We even have Tumblr. And if you're big into translating, we would love to have another set of eyes and ears looking at Tenchi content that, for a lot of people, they've never seen before or have been able to read in English. Until next time, stay gold.